Vermont Congressman Peter Welch is the Chief Deputy Whip for House Democrats and a member of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
So is there any movement at all on the tax issue?
Not that I can see. I mean, there's glimmers. Bottom line, my view, if we're going to make a substantial dent in the deficit, we've got to have balanced cuts. Democrats have to be willing to move in that direction. And we've got to have revenues. Revenues have to be part of the solution. And if you listen to Mitch McConnell, the Republican position is revenues are off the table.
Right. Well, because they say that it would just stifle the economic growth. What's your response to that argument?
Well, I don't think there's any evidence for that. Right now, you know, our corporations are sitting on about $2 trillion in cash reserves. Their profits are up. Why are they not investing? It's not because they're not getting a tax cut that would provide additional money on top of that $2 trillion. It's really because we have high unemployment and because there's an apprehension that if they make more goods, we won't have consumers to buy them. So there needs to be some aggregate consumer demand here, and obviously we've got to try to get people back to work. But if we want to have long-term fiscal stability, when we have a gap between how much we're collecting in revenues, about 16% of the gross domestic product, and we're spending about 24%, then obviously you've got to bring that spending down and bring those revenues up.
You know, what is your stand at this point on entitlement programs like Social Security and Medicare?
Well, in the long run, we have to make them secure and solvent so that they are there for the benefit of older Americans. They should be dealt with on their own terms. You know, President Reagan and Speaker O'Neill had the last grand bargain on Social Security, but it was about Social Security. Adjustments were made and we extended the solvency. So those of us who are strong supporters of Medicare and Social Security should be all in on making adjustments and improvements so that it is sustainable. What we don't want to do and would reject is raiding Social Security or Medicare to essentially prop up the general fund.
So how much pressure are the Democrats feeling from the progressive side to not make any concessions to Republicans?
Well, that just won't work. I mean, both sides have folks who think that we can continue along the same road without any adjustments, and that just isn't going to work. I think that where the concern among the Democrats is now is the injection of Social Security into these discussions, and we don't know exactly what the president has in mind. If what he's talking about is something specific to Social Security and for Social Security, then that is something everybody should pay some attention to. But if it's about basically raiding Social Security so that you can maintain, say, some of these tax cuts for the high end, that's really off the table as far as Democrats are concerned.
Right. You know, President Obama says Republicans shouldn't hold a gun to the heads of the American people. And you're saying that the Democrats are getting pressure to hold their ground, too. Both sides pretty much standing firm. Is it fair to say that one side is holding the other side hostage here?
Well, bottom line, I do think that we've got to pay our bills. And I was one of the folks who voted in favor of a clean extension of the debt ceiling, because I see that as a separate obligation. We pay our bills, and that includes, incidentally, bills that were incurred for things that I was totally opposed to, like the Iraq War, like the Bush tax cuts, like Medicare Part D. But we also have this long-term problem, and what's going on here is what typically goes on. There's a leverage moment. So both sides are trying to leverage the situation to get their advantage. But this is a moment where I think restraint is required, because we have two problems. Short term, we have to pay our bills and not default. That would do enormous damage. 1% increase in interest rates, that's $160 billion additional burden on the taxpayers. Long term, we've got to get to fiscal stability and do that when we've got a weak, fragile economy. So, I mean, I'd like to see both sides put down their rhetorical arguments and just try to make a practical resolution to the situation.
All right. We'll see what happens. Congressman Peter Welch, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.